Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explain series. I am Kushagra Goel and I went through the comment section yesterday. There were a host of banking related questions, so don't worry, we'll be discussing a banking topic today. So I will address those questions then. Coming to the other questions, so a lot of students are asking since when will the current affairs become relevant? Okay, so see, CLAT doesn't define from what month onwards they become relevant. But anything that is within the news, anything related to that is relevant. And that is why this series is helpful for you all, because we'll be covering things that may have happened in the past, but I'll be explaining the historical analysis of those things also. So that is why those concepts also, there we cannot tell you, or we also don't know from what month onward CLAT will start preparing an exam and will consider all those opinions. But if you have gone through CLAT 2020 paper, it covered all specific topics: environment, foreign policy, economics, uh, defense. So all those things, there were questions related to each of them. Okay, so that is why all the topics that are in the news become relevant. There is no specific date for it. The sooner you begin and the more consistent you are with those stories, the better your preparation will be. With regards to a question about blockchain, okay, so once blockchain is more in news, we'll be discussing this, but I'll just explain it to you in very brief. Blockchain is a concept, is a methodology, is a technological concept on which cryptocurrencies are based. Basically, it's a software or a apparatus. Okay, for example, iPhones are based, or MacBooks or Apple software is based on Linux, but Microsoft is not. Or some hardware is based, for example, it's basically the building material, okay, of any software technology. So for example, a building may be made of bricks or of concrete. Blockchain is similar to that. It's a technological apparatus. It's a skeleton basically on which certain softwares are built. Cryptocurrency is a financial software or a financial intermediary or a mode of transferring money based on blockchain, which helps us keeping our transactions anonymous and making them more secure. That's the idea behind it. Satoshi Nakamoto is considered the inventor of cryptocurrencies plus Bitcoin, but cryptocurrencies in general had started coming in, the concept had started building from the 1990s, but Satoshi Nakamoto is considered the founder of Bitcoin. Okay, now let's with regards to certain other questions, for example, contempt of court, we'll link that in the description below because we have discussed that topic. So if you haven't watched it, no problem, watch that episode, then put in your doubts if there are there. And don't worry, if the concept is in news again, which we think it will be, we will be discussing it. Okay, now moving on to today's newspaper. First of all is the news that you see with regards to the Oxford vaccine and its efficacy to 70%. We had discussed efficacy and how efficacy is determined and the nature of the Oxford vaccine itself also. We will be linking that in the description below. So don't worry, if you haven't watched it, watch it, because see, we have covered this topic at depth for a number of times. Now the efficacy report has come out and it is stating that the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca plus Oxford Institution plus Serum Institute of India, three organizations that are working on this vaccines manufacturing and testing, they have come out and stated that the vaccine's efficacy is from 70 to 90%. It rises to 90% when people have been given a half dose and then at a later point of time a full dose. So we'll discuss this news in a little bit more depth all over again. Then on the right hand side, you see Kerala puts hold the libel law on hold. Yesterday only I had talked about this new law, that ordinance that Kerala government wants to bring in, where they want to criminalize people making comments on online social media, basically to curb speech, which they think is harmful for the society in general. But now after the backlash from everyone, from all quarters, they have backtracked this ordinance and they will not be implementing it. But we'll be discussing this in depth at a later point today itself. Then there is the news of move to allow corporates to set up bank attracts flying. Last week, we had discussed that a working group of RBI had come up with the suggestion that corporates should be permitted to open their own banks. Now that there is discussion about it from economists, and they have criticized it for the idea that, see, corporations are businesses, businesses take money from the banks, and India's current banking problem is because businesses took loans and then never repaid it. For example, Kingfisher, Nirav Modi, Mehul Choksi, PNB Bank scam. So those are businesses, corporates who took money to run their business and then ran that money to the ground. The money they took was of depositors' money, and banks have money from all of us, right? People deposit their savings, their earnings in banks, and then that is loaned to corporate. Now imagine if people are putting their money in banks owned by corporates, and then those corporates take away the money, what will happen to the money of those people? So that is why this move has been criticized primarily by Raghuram Rajan, former RBI governor himself. And then, so we'll discuss this in more depth whenever it comes up, or there is more concrete, because see, as of now this is just a mere proposal, but all these concepts become important about ownership of bank and who regulates it and the role of RBI in general. So whenever those things are in specifically news, we will cover them, don't worry. Then there is, on the bottom right, there is a small news of how yesterday former Assam Chief Minister Tarun Gogoi, Chief Minister for 3 tenures, passed away due to post-COVID complications. So we'll be discussing that, and then the news of Bhutan denying and China stating that they have established a village in the Doklam Plateau in Bhutan is been in news. China is saying they have done it, but they have removed the pictures. Bhutan is saying nothing has been done. But all of this is relevant for India, because see, if Bhutan is acquiescence to China about its own territory, then the threat perception for India increases even more. So that is something we have to keep an eye on whenever the story develops further. Now moving on, from political news, nothing is relevant. A lot of you have every day been asking about things that I am skipping. The reason why I am skipping those things are because they are not relevant for you. So again and again being doubtful about whether they are relevant is of no consequence, because they are not. And that is the idea why this series is going on, is to help you all and not waste your time, and rather use your time to prepare on other subjects also. Okay. Now, on the editorial page, there are 3 editorials that will be relevant for us. The first main editorial is also something we'll discuss based on, because it is about health and other things. So I'll be discussing those concepts. On the bottom right is the editorial about banking health in general. This is a far more complex one. The concept being spoken about within the editorial are far more complex at a more advanced banking analysis. Okay, it's a very complex one. It is trying to tell you economic analysis of banking assets vis-a-vis the banking performance. All of that is not so relevant from CLAT perspective, because see, it is an analysis of the banks, but there are certain concepts which are which I'll be dumbing down, which are relevant for CLAT, and telling you those things. Okay, things that, for example, public banks and private banks and the model of governance for them. So those are the things that matter from CLAT perspective, not how banks are performing or what banking. See, CLAT is not an exam where they'll ask you suggest 4 measures to improve the regulation of private or public sector banks or improve the performance of banks. So those kind of things don't become relevant from your exam perspective, but we'll be talking about concepts that are relevant. Okay, on the top left is the editorial and analyzing the Kerala government's ordinance and the constitutional case that matters with it. So I'll discuss that case today with all of you. On the bottom left is about political analysis, not relevant for us. Okay, then on the op-ed page also, the first 2 editorials are of political analysis. Okay, this about interfaith marriages and love jihad. So in crux, this editorial says that, see, the number of marriages that take place within inter-caste are already 2%, and then within that it is minuscule percentage of people who actually marry interfaith. and attacking that is actually trying to stoke more hatred or polarize people, because the number of people who actually enter into interfaith and inter caste marriages is minuscule, less than 2% people who get married. Okay, so all that is political analysis, not relevant at all, but it's just telling you this fact of the number of how many people actually undertake interfaith or intercaste marriages. On the right hand side is from international perspective of how India needs to be stronger internationally, it needs to be stronger domestically, and its economy needs to improve, and how self-reliance as an idea behind Atmanirbhar Bharat is something that we need to profess, because only then people will take us seriously. This editorial is something we'll discuss in depth. Weaker germs, stronger cures. It is a concept of One Health, so that becomes relevant. On the political page from National News, again nothing relevant for us, okay. And then there is a news about how the Ministry of Environment is going to improve the efficiency of granting environmental approval, so that industries are able to set up at a faster pace. And then, so this is entire narrative, it's just an update that they will be updating it within 15 days, that clearance should come within 15 days, so that the process of from idea of establishing a manufacturing or a unit to actually realizing it becomes short, and that will improve the efficiency and ease of doing business in the economy. That is it. Then our Foreign Secretary Harsh Shringla will be visiting Nepal. This is after a long standoff between India and Nepal over territorial dispute for Lepule. So that after a long time now, our Foreign Secretary is visiting Nepal. It is part of a rapprochement between India-Nepal ties. So that is a welcome measure in general. Then political news, not relevant. Then on the right hand side, while inaugurating new flats for Member of Parliaments in Delhi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that, see, these 15 years of a young economy become really important, because see, we are a young democracy, and if our growth measures are correct at this point of time, only then we will be able to realize our potential. Then there is then there is analysis or an obituary about Tarun Gogoi himself. He became the CM of Assam on 3 times, 2001, 2006, 2011, from the Congress party. He was a veteran of the Indian National Congress party. He's as someone, as the article says, as Assam's turnaround man. That's the post the 1985 Assam movement, there was a lot of violence that was happening in Assam. The number of the social indicators of Assam were very poor, and he is credited with the task of nurturing and taking Assam out of that trouble and putting it on the development path. Current Home Minister of Assam, Hemant Biswa Sarma, was also someone who was a protege of Tarun Gogoi himself. He was in the Congress party previously, now in the Bharatiya Janata Party. So he is saying that how Tarun Gogoi has been a one who has transformed Assam and is a part of the man who has a golden touch, a healing touch, and that transformed Assam from a troublesome state to a stable one which can talk about growth. Okay. Then on the international affairs, nothing from the magazine. Okay. Then there is news about the appointments that Joe Biden is making with regards to his offices. So for example, we have discussed that, see, president, there is now a transition about to take place, and January 20th, the new president will take seat. In India, it is very unlikely that so for example, recently when the 2 new cabinets were installed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, we didn't announce, or he didn't announce who he'll be making what minister, right? Before his oath taking ceremony. Portfolio distribution happens at a later point of time. In US, the practice is a little different. That, see, in this transition period only, they start making their appointments, and then these people start working, trying to get analysis and updates about what is already happening, trying to shape, so that on days 1, they are able to get off running. Okay. So that is the entire thing, that now, see, the transition, and Donald Trump has been losing lawsuits across of his claim of widespread voter fraud is falling. So that is why all this dates of transition become important, because they are more welcome. The appointments are more in the sense of people who have been there with the Obama administration or close aides of Joe Biden. So that is very general, nothing specific for us, okay. On the right hand side is a news that matters for us, okay. PM Netanyahu meets MBS, report Israeli media, Saudi Arabia denies it. Why is this relevant, okay? Israel is a Jewish country. Saudi Arabia is an Arabian, Muslim Arabic origin, okay? The conflict of Palestine and Palestinian people being Arabic was the reason why this entire conflict of Israel being isolated as from the Middle Eastern countries with Arabic origin, okay. But now, for example, in CLAT also you had seen the question with regards to the Abraham Accords, and Israel was in news. So now there is reproachment happening between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest countries in the Middle East, reproaching with Israel is a move of international relevance because it will reduce conflict in that region. It shows parts of peace, recognizing mutual trust and all of that. So once the story develops, there is now news that they had met, there is part of an rapprochement taking place. Whether that happens or not, we'll have to keep an eye on that, okay. But this is in news and this is something we have to keep an eye on. Now, China is preparing a probe to bring back lunar rocks. So for example, US is the only country that had gone there, soft landed, and then actually brought back rocks under the Apollo mission. Now China is announcing that, see, they will also go. They have already successfully soft landed on the dark side of the moon. No one has done that before. And now they are planning to actually launch probes and rovers which will go there and bring back. So more details whenever they come. Their program under the Chang'e 5 probe, named after the mythological Chinese moon goddess, will aim to bring back lunar rocks. That is the plan. Whether it is successful or not, we'll have to keep an eye on that, okay. On the economic front, again, there is nothing specific for us. So we'll move on to the more in-depth analysis, okay. The first one, with regards to the Oxford vaccine itself. So I'll just reiterate what the nature of the vaccine is. Everything else we'll link in the description below, okay. It is a modified common cold vaccine, adenovirus vaccine, okay, from chimpanzees. And the better thing in comparison to the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine is that it can be stored at normal temperatures in refrigerators and not cold storage or freezers. So it can sustain temperatures up to 2 to 8 degrees Celsius and can remain effective even then. And secondly, unlike the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine, it has a very high shelf life. It can sustain itself at room temperature also for a short period of time. Now, what are the institutions involved in this vaccine? The first is AstraZeneca and the second is Jenner Institute of Oxford. Now, here's a question for you all, and I would want the response in the comment section, that why is this institution named after Jenner or is known as Jenner Institute? Based on whose or whom is this institution named? I want the responses in the comment section, and let's see how many of you get to know that, okay. If no one answers it, I'll be answering it tomorrow nevertheless. The other institution is a pharmaceutical manufacturing institution, Serum Institute of India. They are based out of Pune. They'll be manufacturing the vaccine for a large number of countries, including India. Now, the efficacy report is out. Emergency use approvals can be applied, and whether that is granted, we had discussed that, who grants that, and we will be linking that in the comment section also. So moving on, the third news with regards to the Kerala ordinance, okay. Now, the main news regarding this is that, see, when you post anything online, even if it is offensive to someone, it is part of your protected speech, okay. You have, under the Article 19, you have right to say, criticize and even sometimes offend individuals, and that right under was taken away under 66A of the Information Technology Act, a central law, okay. But by a 2015 case of Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, Supreme Court struck it down and said that it is a violation of the constitutional protection under Article 19 or of free speech, and the law was overbroad. So what do they mean by overbroad? Or that means that, see, when you are trying to curtail someone's speech, okay, you have to specify it very specifically, narrowly curtail it, and especially when it comes to defamation and free speech, these ideas have to be tailor made, okay. When you all will be in law schools, there will be moot court competitions that happen with regards to specifically detailing the nature of free speech. So, and that is why law schools, NLUs become a very important part. They make you more aware. These co-curricular activities make you more aware of your constitutional rights. So that is one of the charms of NLU, and I hope that this entire series and your preparation helps you realize that dream. So this principle of overbroadness is what was realized in the Shreya Singhal case, and the court stated that, see, when it comes to Article 19 or a constitutional right, when the state is trying to restrict it, see, fundamental rights are a negative restriction, okay. They are negative in nature. Note this down. Negative in the sense they tell what the state cannot do and are a restriction on the states. Just like how fundamental duties are a restriction on the individual. They tell the individual what you cannot do, okay. So when these protections are granted, if the state wants to take away our protections, it has to give them specific reasons and nature of how it will take it away. And that is why this entire ordinance was criticized, because as per the Supreme Court only, it is stated that, see, it is constitutionally wrong for states to do so, and that is why all of this was problematic, okay. So what becomes relevant from CLAT perspective is the case for your legal awareness, the principle of free speech, and then the doctrine of overbroadness, and how if you want to curtail speech, you have to narrowly define it, okay. So these three things become important. Everything else is about specific details of whether the offence is cognizable or non-cognizable, bailable, non-bailable, how much quantum of punishment. All those things are not so relevant. The principles become really relevant, and the name of the case and the idea of this principle, okay. And the Information Act section under which under the case of Shreya Singhal, when it was declared constitutionally wrong, okay. Moving on to the third thing, we had discussed that on the op-ed page there is an editorial. What is this editorial? It is an editorial that tells us that, see, weaker germs, stronger cures. One Health is the optimum approach to counter the impact of anti-microbial resistance, okay. So zoonotic viruses or other diseases that transfer from animals to humans, okay, they can be reduced by the concept of One Health, okay. Now what is One Health? One Health is, see, human diseases, human sickness, okay, animal sickness, and then environmental. If we protect these three constituents, the concept that comes common is One Health. That if the health of human beings is maintained, health of animals is maintained, and the health of environment is maintained, then the health of entire society, that is One Health, all of us would be better off. See, if humans were not exploiting animals that are not supposed to be eaten or are not safe to be eaten, the coronavirus would not have transferred from those animals to us. So that is why when we were exploiting environment too much and we grew too much, that things that were safe for us to eat but were not enough to feed our bellies, we had to eat things that were not beneficial for us. When we ate that, we became sick. So that is why if we maintain a holistic nature, which is this concept of One Health, okay. Now, what is antimicrobial resistance? It is the resistance of your body with regards to new diseases. So not everything about the nature is known to humankind. There are still 40,000 to 50,000 diseases, zoonotic viruses that exist that we do not even know of, okay, from different species. So there is a risk associated. So for example, when MERS and SARS outbreak had happened in 2002 and 2015 respectively, those were new diseases. We had no idea of them, but still a lot of people were able to resist them. But with COVID-19, we have not been able to. So that concept of natural resistance is AMR. Okay. Now, how do you prevent yourself or build up your AMR resistance? It says that, see, if One Health is maintained, the principle of One Health is kept in mind, the risk of AMR or the need of AMR will be reduced. But prevention of that is we could prepare new drugs based on finding out even before the outbreak of these diseases, or we could build up resistance of our body, immunity generally. So what is this concept becomes more important, new drugs before diseases, that we study the diseases of animals, we take care of animal health, take care of diseases that affect them, protect them, then we will be able to know about these diseases. If we know about these diseases and whether humans are not able to protect themselves from it, we'll develop new drugs. When we develop new drugs, our AMR will rise. But if we generally have resistance, that is very good. Immunity, eat healthy diet, exercise regularly, maintain or build up your muscles, less stress, better sleep. So those things naturally that improve your immunity, increase your resistance. Okay. Now, how have the world undertaken this? So India's National Action Plan on AMR by the experts is considered something that is aligned to the principle of One Health. And WHO has recognized this, and that their Global Action Plan of 2015 also believes in the principle of One Health. So that is why this principle of One Health becomes important, and these antimicrobial resistance and methodology. So India's policy measure, what is it? What is this entire concept of One Health? What it means is what becomes relevant. Okay, moving on. Then is again regarding health. So this is an analysis of stating that, see, deaths from COVID could have been avoided in India. See, today, sadly, approximately 1,40,000 people have passed away due to COVID. Okay, that is a huge amount of number of human beings we have lost, fellow Indians who are not there with us anymore. So, and each day we are losing more people. Now this is an analysis of whether that could have been prevented, and the analysis says that we could have, but there is one catch to it, that, see, it is stated that, see, if we build better hospitals, build better ICUs, we would have prevented COVID deaths. But the analysis shows that, see, that is not correct. That rise in public expenditure on health doesn't mean a reduction in death rate. There is no direct correlation to it, because they quote a statement that, see, doctors treat and not hospital beds. Expenditure could be building more hospitals, more ICU beds, more ventilators, better oxygen supply, cleaner oxygen, or more medicines. So all that is post the disease. What we need to work on is, for example, then they have analyzed that countries, South Asian countries, India in comparison to its fellow South Asian countries has done badly. But why have those countries done better is because when they had the outbreaks of from SARS and MERS, they prepared themselves by what? Readiness, early detection and isolation. That with microbial and virus diseases and human to human transfer, this is our only mechanism of protecting, or early detection, more readiness for it, and isolation. That when we have apparatus to deal with such pandemics and epidemics, only then we'll be able to protect more lives. So this is a lesson for future generations, for future epidemics. Now moving on with the banking one. Okay, now quickly telling you, see, there was a question of what is moratorium. Moratorium is basically a limitation that, see, even if let's say you have 5 lakh rupees in your bank account, you can withdraw only a specific limit, that is moratorium. When are banks placed in moratoriums? When banks do not have enough money to pay the deposit of all the people. Okay, people deposit their money in large numbers, but don't take all that money out at once. So bank uses the extra cash to give loans, and then, but when a bank is incapable of giving back all the loans, or has not been repaid its loan, so it has lost money, plus people want their money back, that is when a bank is in problem, which is the Lakshmi Vilas Bank. Okay, now how do you protect that? You place a moratorium and say ki for a time period till we get more capital and get your money back, you cannot take all your money out. Okay, that is a moratorium. Now what kinds of banks exist in India? There are two kinds of banks that exist in India: public sector banks and private sector banks. What are private sector banks? Banks that have 50% plus one ownership by private sector, okay, or government's ownership of those banks is less than 50% plus one. When it is more, they are public sector banks such as State Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, or private sector banks ICICI, HDFC. Private ownership. One case becomes important: RC Cooper versus Union of India. The bank nationalization in 1960 and 1980. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, India's banking health wasn't that well and banks were not there in rural areas, which is still a very big problem. You can see banks are more in better localities, expensive areas, and not, let's say, in a slum. Do you see a bank in a slum? Very rarely, right? So that is why, to increase banking penetrability or uh, placement, or the Jan Aadhaar scheme is basically also that, to increase the banking penetration of for individuals. Indira Gandhi had started banking nationalized. She nationalized, or government took up the ownership of private banks. That was exactly the measure that she did, and it was challenged in the case of RC Cooper versus Union of India. Court said no, it is all right if the government is doing so, because the large gains outweigh the losses. That was it. That was the story. Now this concept becomes important because you need to know what are private ownerships. There was a question also in the comment section: what is private ownership or privatization? Privatization happens when government gives up the ownership of a PSU. A PSU becomes a private owned bank. So for example, today State Bank of India, government says that it will share its shareholding. Let's say it has 50%, it will only retain today, from tomorrow onwards, 49%. So government will not remain majority owner of that bank. When it does, it reduces its ownership from the threshold of 50% plus 1 to less than that. Then is the process of privatization. Okay. Now privatization, that happens when government gives up its ownership. These concepts become important for you from understanding the story that develops. This analysis is about how to improve the efficiency of banks, so we'll ignore this. Okay, this doesn't really matter to you because these analysis will not be part of your, but what becomes important is these principles to be kept in mind. Okay, more and more, whenever there are more details about this, we'll cover more and more topics. Don't worry. So thank you so much. Remember the question, put it down in the comment section: why is the Oxford institution named Jenner Institute? Thank you so much. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any doubts, put them in the comment section. I will be happy to answer them. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you don't miss the update for tomorrow. Thank you.